Incasia, Thrkeeld, and Athetheria in Songs of War are magical towns. Incasia is south of Crown Peak across the river. Thrkeeld is on the other side of a stony plain southwest of Athetheria. Both towns, by the time of present day in Songs of War Season 1, are in ruins. There is, however, some evidence of how long these towns have been like this and when they each may have been built, and when their societies ended. Conveniently enough, I believe these two towns have a terrifying connection with an ancient Ardonian government known as the End Empire. In Songs of War Season 1, upon entering Crown Peak, Thalius explains to Sen and the audience that back when the Ender Knights used to rule Ardonia, Crown Peak was the Ender King's seat of power, but the last king, Rendor, split the world into 6 kingdoms after the people rebelled. This implies the End may have been an empire that spread across all of Ardonia. Therefore, certain groups that may have supposedly posed some sort of threat to the End Empire's rule may have been targeted by them and wiped out. This theory is supported by real-life examples. We all know how empires tended to act long ago. When they see something or someone that may pose a threat to their rule, they do what they can to eliminate it. The Ender Knights, with their aerial capabilities via Ender Dragons and possibly Elytra, the possession of Ender Pearls, and having power over Endermen, would make them a serious threat to these towns. I believe the End Empire wiped out various magic-related towns and or cities such as Incasia and Thrkeeld. Thrkeeld is very far southwest of present-day Athetheria. There is a diary in one of the ruined houses explaining that multiple citizens of the town have fled, and that there is an army of sorts marching to the small town, presumably to wipe it out, and that there has been an enchantment cast on the inner tunnels of the town hall that will prevent said tunnels from taking any damage, presumably to preserve the history of the town and its magic. There is a book in the enchanting room of the town hall, apparently written by the last human sorcerer. It confirms that the sorcerer cast a spell to preserve the inner tunnels of the town hall. This diary is stated to be his or her last diary entry. Depending on the wording of the diary, it was written near the end of the raid or after the town was destroyed, with the sorcerer being a survivor. The structures in Thrkeeld look unrecognizable, so it would be reasonable to assume there was a decently sized battle during its downfall. Depending on the size of the trees in Thrkeeld, it's possible that Thrkeeld is a fairly recent town, possibly the last magical town that fell during the End Empire's reign. Incasia, let's go! Woo! Incasia has a north tower and a west tower, both identical, both housing enchanting tables. This supports the idea that Incasia was a magical society. Depending on the size of the trees, it is reasonable to assume Incasia is a very ancient town, and it's possible it either quietly died out or it was raided by the End Empire a couple centuries before the First Great War, perhaps 3 to 4 centuries. Most of the houses, as well as the chapel and graveyard, are surprisingly intact, so it could be that the Empire chose a more quiet route for destroying the town. They likely rounded up civilians and either moved them out of the town, put them to work, or straight up massacred them, as there is no evidence so far of there being any survivors. They likely broke some structures due to some civilians showing some resistance to the Empire. There is another theory I should probably bring up that it could be the Nether that could have raided the town, though I myself am more inclined to believe in the End Empire theory. The Ardoni are the most popular species in Songs of War, and one of the most well-known aside from humans, as the land of Ardonia literally shares its name with the Ardoni. We all know that Ardoni wield a form of magic that can uniquely be wielded by them called songs, which have 4 orders: Mobilium, Aggressium, Protisium, and Saporium. So, despite the threat they could pose, why did the Empire seemingly ignore them? Simple. They were too much of a threat. While the towns were small threats that could grow into a bigger problem, the Ardoni were already very well versed in their abilities to wield songs, and despite having multiple clans, could easily unite against the Empire if threatened. The Empire, recognizing this, chose not to try to rule over them or pick a fight with them, as it would A. consume a large amount of resources, B. they could lose a lot of land, And C, they could lose power or respect over what areas of Ardonia they control. This is my theory as to why Ardoni are unaffected by the Empire. It's clear that Ardonia was ruled by the Enderites for some time, especially since there's a vertical end portal in the southern Uncharted Islands and an unfinished stronghold in the northern mid-Uncharted Islands. Upon entering Crown Peak in Season 1, Thalius states that the Enderites ruled Ardonia from Crown Peak, which is directly south from the stronghold which houses the end portal. The Enderites ruled Ardonia until the last king of the Empire, Rendor, split the Empire into 6 kingdoms in the western jungles of Felden, the northern tundras of Northwind, the northwestern forests of Concord, the eastern coasts of Hydrafell, the southern volcanic lands of Carthan, and the southern desert of Cydonia, after the people under the rule of the Empire rebelled against the Enderites. I believe the splitting of the End Empire resulted in the Nether preparing to invade the overworld. The Enderites no longer had global control or eyes across the overworld, and the kingdoms were still quite new given that Rendor was still alive during the First Great War. With this evidence, it is entirely plausible that the splitting of the Empire and the weakness of the overworld kingdoms at the time gave the Nether the opening they needed to swoop in and conquer the overworld. Take the US, for example. They gained their independence from Britain and remained neutral for a few conflicts for about a decade, especially during the French Revolution, mainly because the US was still a new nation and was still quite weak at the time and needed time to gather resources, firepower, and funds. Athetheria is a city of magic, mainly enchanting, and during Songs of War Season 1, Episodes 1 and 2, houses an Ender Dragon egg. You may be wondering why or even how Athetheria is still standing and active by the time of Season 1. I have 2 theories for why that is. 1. Athetheria could have been supported and funded by the Empire to research enchanting and various forms of magic. This is supported by the top Athetheria tower housing the end portal frame with an eye in it, an ender chest, and an ender crystal at the center of the room. 2. Athetheria could have been founded by the survivors of Thrkeeld after the splitting of the End Empire, though since the supposed last human sorcerer left their final diary there, this theory isn't very plausible. Hey CK, I made a video essay, you proud of me?
I am very proud of you. Great job, Stopwatch. I'm recording this while having zero idea what the video actually is, but it's probably going to be great. Yippee!
This video essay kind of sprouted out of the seed of my curiosity in Incasia. I began theorizing how Incasia could have been destroyed, and then I discovered Thrkeeld. 4 friends and myself actually spent 3 days restoring Incasia based off of various context clues on how everything may have looked before the town fell. The chapel was the worst part, purely because of how it was built. There was an excessive amount of exterior detail, the interior was incomplete, and there was little to no hints as to what the back half of the chapel may have looked like. I also have a theory that Incasia, Thrkeeld, or any other unknown magic town may have created golems like the famous iron golem we see in Oakendale in Season 1. Anyway, thanks for coming to my TED Talk, and I hope y'all have a great day, evening or night. Laters.